How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boil Hobby Time. This week I'm doing a Halloween special, and to start things off, I jumped into Nomad Sculpt for the iPad and started designing my monster. I looked at various artists' renderings of Wendigos from around the internet, and they are all pretty scary. A famous child-friendly Wendigo is Bullwinkle from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. And that was a joke. But, like Bullwinkle, this Wendigo is an herbivore. So it likes to eat sticks and water plants instead of people. But, like a real moose, it will not hesitate to kill you if provoked. Or if you mess with his pet squirrel. The most difficult part of this sculpt was definitely the hands. It took me a long while to find something I liked. But I did eventually figure it out, finished up all the final details, then I exported and printed it. The other character in this diorama is this little Davy Crockett looking guy. And standing next to each other, you can see just how scary it would be to run into this monster in real life. I wanted to put a lantern in the little explorer's hand so he could see the monster more clearly. So I drilled some holes through his arm and his back and moved on to the base. For the foundation, I'm using this plank of wood, and then for the landscape itself, I'm using some layers of XPS foam. I hot glued those together, and then mid-squeeze I ran out of my glue stick. So after a quick reload, I was good to go. I then used my handheld hot wire cutter to carve away at the foam to create a little slope down into the lake and create the little shoreline. I then used a torch and some sandpaper to give a little bit more of a natural look to the slope. And of course I used the necessary precautions so as not to inhale any of the dust or fumes from the foam. I then covered it with a terrain paste made from plaster, Mod Podge, and paint, and this time I added some fine grit sand to help add a little bit more texture. I set that aside to dry, and I started painting the miniatures. I started painting one way, using a side highlight and some contrast paints. And then I quickly lost my way and forgot what I was doing and started painting him a bunch of different ways that were not the way I had started painting him. So in the end I had kind of a hodgepodge of weird painting footage. But I came up with something that I liked fairly well. Has the right amount of spooky, in my opinion. And I painted the little frontiersman like you would expect a frontiersman to look. After the terrain paste had dried, I used some scenic glue to stick down some pebbles. Then I used some watered down scenic glue and isopropyl alcohol to stick on various sizes of sand. It was all done in the name of texture. I also added some driftwood to add a little bit more visual interest. I tested everything against the moose to make sure it was to scale. I left it to dry. After about 12 hours, that was dried, and I primed it. I added various washes in kind of a gradient going from light to dark down to the bottom. The resin itself does add quite a bit of a realistic water look, but adding the gradient just took it to another level. I then added some little grass and reeds along the shore. I finished up the rest of the ground cover. After all of the scenery was dry, I used some acrylic sheets to create a little reservoir for the resin to be poured into. I sealed up all of the sides with hot glue. Then I mixed up the resin following the instructions on the box. 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. And I'll just let you watch this part. After 72 hours, the resin was nice and hard, so it's time to take the acrylic off. It did peel some of the paint away from the foam, which is not a huge deal because I'm going to be covering it with a piece of styrene to clean up those edges anyways. I shaved off the excess from the top and the sides of the resin. And then I added some water ripples to create a more realistic surface. I sculpted the ripples around his legs where he would be creating some small waves and a wake. Then I drilled some holes for the wires to pass through from the little figure into a battery housing. Unfortunately, I did forget to plan ahead for this, so I had to cut away at the base. Kind of just throw something together. It's not the cleanest, I do know that. But after I had put on the styrene and painted the little housing with the black 3.0, it wasn't too noticeable. The last thing to do was to stick all of the trees in place along the shore, and also add a few little pieces of grass that got stuck in the moose's antlers. They called it good. And that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with this build. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of my patrons for their continued support of this channel. Really appreciate every one of you. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.